Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you got into being a leadership coach. I
Yeah,
have a lot of friends who are like, that's a profession, that's a thing. Where did you start and then how did you get into, if you want to just give us a little bit
yeah,
on how you got into being a leadership coach?
yeah. So I spent the majority of my career in medicine. I always tell people that was my first career path. So I was a PA, so physician assistant for 13 years. I'm still licensed, but I don't practice actively in the traditional sense. So after about 13 years of full or part-time work, decided to jump into coaching. But the backstory to that is I practiced 7 years in cardiology, and while in cardiology, got certified to be a health coach. And after 6 months of doing that, walking people through behavior change and actually being with them as they changed habits, that was the thing that was most exciting for me. And then recognizing I could do it in any behavior change. So leadership being one of those spaces. Um, so got invited into Giant 2018, 2019 through one of the other coaches and consultants and went through X-Core, which was a year-long leadership development track, and just knew I needed something because I hadn't quite found the language
Mm.
um, as to why I loved coaching so much. So still at that point was practicing medicine, and my husband at the time, we were doing real estate investing, we were doing a variety of different things, but nothing seemed to be fulfilling for me. And when I looked back, I'm like, coaching was the thing, but why? And I couldn't really understand why. I couldn't put language to it. And then going through Giant, I was like, okay, so creatives, we love seeing potential in people. We can see their highest good and we will fight to the death for them. And I'm like, okay, this is why. And right after that, honestly, just start praying of like, okay, God, you know how you built me, so now what?
Yeah.
And actually went to find a health coaching company, started working with them full time, and just couldn't shake Giant, honestly. Could not shake what it did for me, and decided to get certified end of 2020 and started building my business on the side of working full time with the health coaching company. And then 2021 came along, and my company I was working with were actually terminating people, and they were offering severance at the time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to jump. I'm going to see what happens. And I'm going to just like see if I can make this work. Well, long story short, there was a client of mine the exact same week I was finding out they were terminating people or they were letting people go, that he said, hey, I need more work from you. And this is what it would look like. And if you're willing, like, this is what it would look like over the next year and a half. And it was exactly what I was making at my company. And I was like, all right, God answered the prayer. Let's do this.
Mm.
So just like knew it was the trajectory of where it was supposed to head.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is the benefit of being able to be aware, self-aware, and to know yourself, right?
Yeah.
So going through the history and different practices in cardiology, here's a like a quick rapid fire question for you. Have you ever experienced a toxic leader or boss?
Yeah, I think most of us have, honestly. I definitely have. So I worked in the ER 2.5 years when I got done with schooling. I would say that was the time experienced like a manipulative kind of toxic boss. And then when I
Mm.
went into cardiology, had somebody whose behavior wasn't ideal, but I respected him a whole lot because of what he did for patients and the sacrifices he would make. Um, and that's, looking at the language that we have now with Giant, looking back at it too, recognized the amount of pressure he was under and can clearly see how that would show up in his behavior and how he would treat employees. And that's, I think, the balance a lot of us feel anyway, like with the clients that I'm working with too. They feel the balance of like, hey, I respect this leader, but I don't sometimes respect their actions,
Mm.
or like their actions aren't really fulfilling who I know them to be. So I have a lot more empathy, I think, for people now and understanding where they're coming from.
Yep, yep. I've heard that a lot from the people that we serve and even myself. I think that was one of the biggest things. And it seems too simple, it seems too small to make a big deal out of, but it really does give you peace. And it is, I think, the process of maturing. You understand that there is a world full of people who are not like me. And I need to figure out, because I can really easily see the flaws in others, but it's hard to see the flaws in myself. I need to look inside. That's what ultimately started. And then that peace and that maturing gives you a lot more grace for yourself. And then it allows you to in turn give a lot more grace to others. I hear that grace in your response, and I respect that. Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being willing to share that. So,
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about one of the tools that you really enjoyed along this process.
Yeah. So Leader Mirror, there's honestly, I could name probably 5 that have been incredibly impactful for me, but Leader Mirror is one that I played around with and like really dove into, I would say, this past year and a half, honestly, and helping clients understand what leadership really is. And it is actions and reactions to certain stimuli. So when breaking down like behavior change, it's really a way I can help them understand like, hey, your actions, like where are you at on the scale? What's it like to be on the other side of you? How are people perceiving you? So it really helps me break it down into consistency of some sort and helping them establish a habit of like, when this happens again, what's your reaction? Like, what can you change? And, I had to do this work on myself first. And I think, looking at it in that perspective of like, how do you do the work on yourself first? That way you're showing up as healthy as you possibly can, because that model that you're setting really does translate no matter where you're at in the organization. So if you are, the top executive, if you're CEO of the company, then, you can scale this down. But if you're, first level manager, I work with some of those right now. And I'm like, your influence is massive. You don't even recognize the ability that you have to influence those around you. So I think it is like how we use this really does pay off in dividends.
Yeah. That's huge. Tell us, will you lead us through the Leader Mirror tool that we have from Giant? And one thing I love about these that I just heard yesterday on the Giant podcast, it's on Spotify or whatever. I've listened to it. It's probably on Spotify, but Steve Cochran said that these tools are principles, not laws, and they're principles that we live by, but they're not ever to become worshipped to the point of being a law. So these principles, would you walk us through the Leader Mirror?
Yeah, I love that. I think it gives you insight into how to go deeper, honestly, too. It like just is like a bit of a like something you get to play with. That's what I always say. Like, let's just play around with this, because you can learn something about yourself each time you use it. You can go deeper with it. But so one of the phrases we use at Giant is, what's it like to be on the other side of you? And that really hits on self-awareness. Like, what do people actually experience on the other side of you? Is it something that's healthy, or is it something that's maybe a little less desirable? So that's the question we ask. And it really is like holding up a mirror of like, if you reacted that way and saw yourself, what would you see? So first level here is reactive and proactive. So if you're looking at this in the way that you're using it with yourself, how would you grade yourself here? Do you feel like you're in the middle of like reactive, proactive? Which situations even would you say you're more proactive in? Or which situations do you feel like maybe you're a little bit more reactive? So really going through your day and setting yourself up with the different stresses you're experiencing, different relationships that you're in. With yourself, how you're leading yourself. What does it look like to be proactive for you, and where are you showing up reactive for yourself? Next one
do you have any examples that you can give us of any situations?
Yeah. So I'll just use myself as an example. So even with like our health, that's like, as a leader, we're talking about, if we go through Peace Index, we're talking about the health of the leader, whether that's mental health, whether that's physical health, spiritual health, whatever. So what does it look like to have proactive habits to take care of yourself? And what does it look like to be reactive, right? So just as an example, if I'm, hitting the snooze button for a half an hour, that's a half an hour out of my day that now I'm going to show up a little bit more reactive, versus if I'm getting up at the time that I say I'm going to and starting my day with practices that are really giving me energy, like journaling, reading, working out, whatever that might be, then I'm proactively stepping into my day, knowing that I'm going to give my best to my people because I'm spending time by myself, which is what I need to be the healthiest version of myself to give to other people. So that would be an example of proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, well, thanks.
So then next layer here is accidental versus intentional. So When we, the 5 voices actually gives really great insights into each of us and how we show up accidentally. And with my voice in particular, so the creative connector pioneer, if I'm accidental, I can show up with a bit of not seeming clear with my communication. And I've noticed that. I've had to work really hard on that because I have so many different ideas, and sometimes it doesn't come out clear and concise the way that I want it to. But when I'm intentional about that and intentional about including the rest of the team and asking great questions and tapping into the curiosity that I normally have, like that brings out the best side of me, and other people experience that. So that's kind of an example of what I've seen. As another quick example, like a nurturer voice, for example, when they're accidental, they can easily get burnt out because they have this tendency to just care so deeply about the people that they're with that they will sacrifice themselves over and over again. So when I'm working with them on this tool, I'll be like, hey, when you're showing up this way, and I actually was just working with a leader yesterday talking about her health in particular, and it is not being intentional to work towards the health that she knows that she wants. So we're, stripping that away, kind of like unpeeling the layers of the onion of like, okay, what is something you can do? Let's take away the first layer here to be a bit more intentional with your health. I know you want to give to all of those people around you, but what's the sacrifice and what are the implications if you continue to do that? So like really bringing high challenge in these situations, because it gives ownership back and it allows us to see it from a perspective of like what long-term happens if nothing changes.
That's good. Consistent and consistent.
Yeah. So consistency and inconsistency. So I've asked this to groups of leaders recently. I'm like, what does it feel like when you have a leader who's consistent? Like, what does that feel like? And the words that they use are, it feels like planned. It feels like they care. It's almost like loyalty and discipline, and they've thought through things to be really consistent on how they treat every single person. And then inconsistent, obviously, is the opposite, where it feels sporadic. It's not planned out. It just feels like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall kind of a situation. And it doesn't feel as good on the other side, right? So it doesn't feel like you're being part of something. It actually feels just like you're going in various different directions. And I think as a team, that's not helpful when the leader is doing that. So it is, how do we bring that in if they're noticing those patterns? And what does consistency look like? And again, it's very small amounts of consistency to work towards the middle ground there. But what are those practices that you're noticing you need to be a bit more consistent with, or who are the people in your life that you need to maybe be a bit more consistent with?
Yeah, that's awesome. Becky, thank you so much. You just rolled right through that and gave us great gold content. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to be here.
Yeah, these are like fundamentals in athletics. And I love how you put this tool. You love to play with the tool different times, different ways, because there's so many different variations, and our lives change on a daily or hourly basis. But it is a good check-in to look in the mirror every now and then. We do that every morning when we wake up to make sure we look presentable, but how do we show up? What's in our hearts? What's in our minds, right? Have we looked in the leader mirror? So Becky, this is awesome. I wish we had 20 more minutes, a lot more, but where can people find you and try to reach out and get some coaching?
Yeah, so I am very active on LinkedIn. So you can always find me on LinkedIn at Becky Wolfe, and Instagram, Becky Wolfe Coaching, or email beckywolfeconsulting@gmail.com.